Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Josh. I'm going to be your presenter today. Our topic today is payroll history reports. Our current version of Church Windows is 26.24.0. We are working on 26.24.1 now. So keep an eye out for that. It'll probably be out here in the next couple of weeks, probably. I don't have a firm release date, but just letting you know. Let's go into payroll. So when we go into payroll, we go up here to reports and export at the top left, and then I click on that, and then below that to the left, pay reports, and right down here, history reports, and the submenu with the three different history reports comes up here, okay? Payroll history report 1, payees detail hours report number 2, and finally the third federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail report. So just from a technician standpoint who supports this software, folks, is I use these reports in some way, shape, or form on my support calls quite a bit. Okay, depends on what the user's wanting to know, what information they're seeking. But for me personally, as a technician, these are invaluable reports to helping answer some specific questions that folks have about payroll. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of them. So let's look at our payroll history report first, okay? These screens that are kind of opening the options window, option screens that open, are very similar for all three of the reports. You're going to be able to choose a date range. You're going to be able to choose, which employees do you want to choose it for? Do you want pay type, pay period, department? You're going to be able to include or omit archived or terminated payees or employees. The report format is really important here because it will provide totals only, meaning for all employees that you choose or select, or you can typically run them for each payee or employee and have a page break on each payee. And I'm going to show you a little bit because that becomes important when talking or answering questions that we have about whether it's the 941 form or the W-2 or what have you, okay? And I'm pretty sure most of these, if not all of them, can only be run for payees, employees. Cannot choose notify. If I try to click the down arrow next to payee type, cannot choose contractors. So these reports typically can only be run for employees, not contractors. We have other reports for contractors if you want those, okay? All right, so we're going to run a totals only report here for the history report initially. And the reason why is because this report specifically is a summary by month and quarter. Whether you choose totals only or per payee, it is still always going to include or only total the totals for either the employee or for all employees or for the select employees by month and by the quarter, as we're going to see here momentarily. Okay? As with other reports in Church Windows, the reporting conventions, as I call them, the reporting options or conventions are consistent throughout the software, is we do have a tab here across the top called columns. Okay? So it's going to default to including these information columns. One column called Advanced EIC is not added by default. I can reset to the default columns, but I'm pretty sure I haven't changed anything. So if I were to click that, it would just go back. But if I were to say take off a particular column and then do reset to default, it just adds all those columns back to the right. Okay? But you do have the ability to not only choose the columns you want to see on the report, but also the order in which they appear. And what I mean by that is, and again, folks, we're kind of going back to some reporting conventions everywhere in the software, is you can add or remove columns back and forth between available columns on the left and visible columns on the right using the arrows, or you can double click. Furthermore, if you want, you can go over here to the list on the right, these arrows, up and down arrows on the right side, and you can push and reorder these columns into virtually any order you wish. Okay? So I just like to point out, because that's true on all the column selections in Church Windows, whether it's membership, donations, accounting, or payroll, those columns, when you have a columns tab, you see these arrows, left and right arrows and up and down arrows to reorder or add or remove columns at will. But I'm big on double clicking. So if I do, double click to local tax, it takes it off, puts it over under available columns. I double click on it, it adds it back. Okay. That's the quickest way in my understanding of the software. So let's just reset those defaults. Nothing should have changed, but and of course you then have some font control. Typically I don't mess with that too terribly much on my calls, but we're going to leave the default columns and we're going to look at this report. Okay. So totals only for 2025. I can run it for a specific date range. Like say if I want to run it for Q1, I can run it for a month, a day, a week, 3 months, 6 years, 5 years. It doesn't matter. Payroll has no end of year, folks. So you can run these payroll reports with any range of dates you want. You have no restrictions for running reports that cross years in payroll like you do in accounting. Accounting will only let you run reports by accounting year only, or for each accounting year. All right. So it's just important to understand payroll doesn't have those same limitations. But I'm going to leave it for the full year now, and there's a reason why. So when we now click and preview the report, it now opens up our payroll history report for 2025, January through December, and we notice month January, February, March, Q1, down the left-hand side. Let me get out my drawing tool again, steer some focus. Right over here, month, and all the way down the left here is what it's talking about. All right. So this report really does allow us to see what happened in each month and quarter and for a grand total at the end of the year for 2025. So this report, and we're going to look at this again under the federal taxable earnings withholdings and net pay detail report as well, is it tells us here's gross pay for the month and then gross pay for the quarter. Then it shows the Social Security amounts that were withheld from employees for January, February, and March. Medicare withholding for employees. Federal income tax withheld. Okay. State tax withheld. Local taxes withheld. Any miscellaneous taxes, net pay for all employees after tax. Any deductions or allowances. Now it doesn't detail the taxable or non-taxable status of those deductions or allowances. We'll see that on a later report. Total net pay amounts. And this is one of the things I really, really like about this report is the 941 amount right here in this column on the far right. Okay. These are my 941 deposits by month and the quarter. Okay. So, you can run the pay period deductions report to see those totals, the 941 totals, but the nice thing here is this summarizes it by month and quarter for you. Okay, so when I go to process my 941 form for first quarter, my total tax withholding or 941 total is 6322.34, and that checks out. Okay, now I do have training data in here for the entire year, but it does again show Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then my totals for the year, grand totals. Okay. So folks probably are wondering, well, what's in parentheses? Those are the earnings, folks. So when you go down to as we do with all of our reports in Church Windows, when you go to the very last page of the report, it shows a legend of what is appearing on the report. Okay. Amount in parentheses is gross taxable amount for deduction appearing above it. And deduction synonymous to me in my mind for withholding. Okay. So right now, so say federal taxable earnings for January were $15,137 and change. And then $14,228 and then $15,021 coming up to a first quarter grand total of $44,386.66 with total federal withholding of $1330. That checks out with my 941. These reports, folks, are really, really great to help answer questions that you have about figures that are appearing on tax reports and tax forms, whether it's the 941 form or the W-2s, okay? These reports really help with that, this history report and the federal taxable earnings. So how I'm going to verify that is, you're going to see this in a minute, but I'm going to run my draft 941 form, because it takes too long for me to run the real one through Atrix, to make sure those totals check out, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close the report and go up to Reports, Tax Reports, Draft Quarterly 941 form. I choose 2025 and Q1, click Next. Here's my 632234, which was the total tax deposits for the first quarter. That checks out to the penny. Click Yes. Now opens up my draft form. Here's my total earnings for the quarter of 44,386.66 with my total withholding of 1330. And when I looked at those Social Security and Medicare amounts, those wages or earnings totals and the amounts here are doubled based on what that history report showed, right? Because this total has to include both employer and employee share combined. So it doubles those amounts. So when if I were to go into Atrix and process this in my tax forms, these exact figures are going to print on that form. Okay, so really important report under our history report here for helping to answer questions you have. Now again, I can run it for per payee, okay? And I can even, like I said, do a page break on each payee if I wish, and then what it does is it splits out each one of my employees. So here's Larry, my senior pastor. Here's his gross earnings. He has no Social Security and Medicare withheld and no wages, as ministers won't. Here's the federal amount tax withheld he's requested and state, and what the federal, state, and local wages are. So again, if I were to go in and run his, say, draft W-2 form for 2025, these totals would check out on that report, on that form, okay? And when I go to the next page, here's Jimmy Hilliard, my custodian and part-time organist. So again, really nice way to break down and summarize employee totals or figures. Okay. All right. Let's go to now our reports, history report, and our payee detail hours report. This, notice, again, same type of layout in terms of choosing my date range. I can choose contractors here, folks. I'm sorry. I thought I could not choose contractors, but I can here under the detail hours report. So I can choose a date range. I can choose who I want to see, my pay types, pay period, department. Do I want a specific employee I want to run it for, including archived or terminated payees if I wish, totals only, or per payee. So I feel personally that this report is most effective when run per payee, and you're going to see why here in a minute, okay? Because what this does, folks, is it just summarizes or details specifically the hours that how an employee's been paid and how much, paid time off they have, whether that's vacation or PTO or what have you. So right here, we go to the columns and we got pay date, standard hours worked, PTO earned, used, available. Okay. I don't want the posted by. That's irrelevant to me. Don't care about that. We're going to click print. But I am going to run it per payee with a page break on each payee. I can report the PTO in days. If I don't check that in the bottom right down here, it's going to report it in hours. Okay. The software does calculate hours based on an 8-hour workday, but here we are looking at our, various columns across the top, regular hours worked, PTO earned, PTO used, PTO available. In this case, Larry's our senior pastor. He's salaried. There are no hours entered for him, hence why shows nothing for him. It shows he's got 10 days of PTO available. He's used none. And so he shows here down at the bottom, 10 earned, none used, 10 available. Okay. And again, folks, the legend tells you paid time off for this label and this payee does not accumulate. What I mean is if it were, meaning that with time worked that my employees were earning their vacation or sick time or what have you, it would say this does accumulate, and it would show amounts that were being earned with each successive pay date. But as it is in my church, where those employees have those hours or that paid time off available at the very first outset of the new year, okay? So when we now go down to Jimmy, again, our Hilliard, our court custodian and part-time organist, he has again, let me uncheck this here. So let's uncheck report PTO and days and click print, just see how it reports differently. 80 hours, right, earned. Go down to Jimmy, 80 hours earned. He did take 8 hours here, and you can see clearly in on August 15th, he took 8 hours of paid time off for a -8 in the used column or PTO available. Subtracting that, and it does show his available PTO as of the end of the year at this point is 72 hours, which is correct, okay? And, looking at the legend does tell you exactly what's on the report. But if you want to verify, what your employees have in terms of, and it does accumulate his regular hours that we've paid him too. So we notice we have been adjusting his hours. He is an hourly employee. And so we have been adjusting his pay based on the amount of hours he's worked. And it does reflect that on this report. And it does summarize it by quarter. Okay. And then of course each detailed pay date with a grand total of hours worked throughout the year. Okay. And this report is true for every employee. Okay. I think Steve Jones here is again our part-time associate or our associate pastor. We have put in 1 hour for hours worked for him. Salaried folks, honestly, that's optional. Everybody, you don't have to put in hours. I've just chosen to show that to you because you can put a 1 under hours worked, but it doesn't affect the gross pay amounts. Okay. Great report. If you go in and you award or you give your employees their paid time off or sick or vacation to start the year, right? You want to verify it. This is a great report to come in and check out and go, oh yeah, I've, here's the amount that I've given them in their earned column to start the year on 1/1. Okay, so great report for that. Well, or if you want to print it out and give it to your employees, if they've got a question about what time they've worked or what have you, I could print it for one employee, okay, or payee. Finally, folks, we've gone a little longer here than I thought we would, but that's okay because I think the detail is really important here. Is our federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. This, folks, is one of the reports that I use most commonly when folks question totals that I have on tax reports. If I do totals only and I do quarter 1, right, so January 1 to March 31st, print, it's going to total everything. So here's my total, 44,386 for my federal wages on my 941 form. Okay, so that checks out. Here's my 1330 for my federal amount withheld. This report, folks, does show taxable and non-taxable allowances and taxable and non-taxable deductions. Right up here, taxable allowances, non-taxable deductions, taxable deductions over here, and non-taxable allowances. All right, the other history report did not do that. It just summarized them as monies being added in or deducted from employees' paychecks. This report allows us to determine whether perhaps a deduction or allowance was set up incorrectly. Maybe something is showing up as a taxable allowance when it should be showing as a non-taxable allowance. Some of you may be asking, what's a non-taxable allowance? Well, housing, notably. Okay. Most of this is going to be probably pastor's housing allowance, maybe even self-employment or SECA reimbursement. But SECA would be a taxable allowance. So that is not SECA. Okay, or a Social Security offset. Okay. But these totals, if I choose, and again, I'm going to show this, but I'm going to kind of wrap things up here momentarily, folks, is when I am asked from a church about an employee, when an employee asks me or somebody calls me or a church contacts me and they say, hey, I've got a question about an employee's W-2 form, folks, this is one of the very first reports that I take them to. Because when I do per payee page break on each payee, or I do specific and check just the one I want, okay, and I click print, it shows every single pay date that I have paid for the employee for the year, Now, folks, I only had half a year's worth of data in 2024. That's why it doesn't show the whole year, okay? But it would. It still breaks it down by quarter. It still does my totals, and these totals then check out or match up with what's reporting on, say, the employee's W-2 form, okay? And many times I'll come in here and I'll go, well, what's showing up under taxable allowances or non-taxable deductions or taxable deductions? And a lot of times we can help answer or resolve questions regarding those totals that are appearing on an employee's W-2 form simply by looking at this federal taxable earnings report, okay? So just be aware, these reports really will help answer questions you have about totals for, say, a quarter for 941 or for, say, individual employees' W-2s for the year, okay? So just be aware that this can be very helpful. Oh yeah, and I can choose this contractors for this as well. So if a contractor's has questions for me about why their total on their form is there. And what I like about it specifically, sorry, I'm gonna wrap this up, I said, is it does break down and show the pay dates that the employees were paid. And when employees got a lot too much in there maybe or too little, I say count up all of the paychecks, the pay dates down the left side, or go down to the total down at the bottom. Okay. Is there a total down here? It should be. Oh, maybe not. Total them up because you may find that there was an extra paycheck or something that was posted by mistake in there, got entered and posted and never got voided out a lot of times. Or maybe there's a check that's missing, But this report breaks it down by pay date and shows exactly what occurred on every single paycheck. And over on the far right, folks, of course, the net pay amount. And for employees where it's applicable, where they receive paychecks, it shows the payment method, of course, EFT or check number. Okay, so it does show check numbers as well. So if you have to go in and, you're investigating where a check number is for an employee, this will help provide that as well. So, all right, I've gone a few minutes long, folks. That is where we are going to leave our topic for today.